As you may remember, throughout the presidential race, Donald Trump promised his voters that he would put an end to the bloody war in Ukraine within 24 hours. And judging by what is happening in Washington right now, Donald Trump is really trying to keep his word. After he won the presidential election, insiders in Washington began to report that Donald Trump, without waiting for his inauguration, had already developed a so-called peace plan that should put an end to the current war in Ukraine. Later, this information was also confirmed by influential representatives of the American media. In particular, the influential American newspaper, The Wall Street Journal, and the weekly American news magazine Newsweek, said that Trump's peace plan really exists, and that this plan should be presented to Russian President Vladimir Putin shortly. Later, this information was also confirmed by billionaire Elon Musk, who was personally present during the conversation between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky. According to him, Trump's peace plan provides for freezing the front and creating an 800-mile demilitarized zone, where British troops and armies of other European states will enter. At the same time, according to this peace plan, Russia will receive all the territories currently under the Russian army's control. In addition, Donald Trump also promised to establish a moratorium on Ukraine's accession to NATO. This moratorium will last for 20 years. The most interesting thing about this so-called peace plan is that the United States reserved the right to continue arming Ukraine in exchange for Kiev's refusal to join NATO. Thus, it becomes clear that Donald Trump wants to freeze the conflict in Ukraine according to the Cyprus scenario, dividing this country with a so-called buffer zone. Let me remind you, after the invasion of Cyprus by the Turkish army, the island's northern part came under the full control of Ankara. Since 1974, this island has been divided by the so-called buffer zone, which is under the control of the UN peacekeeping forces. And now, the Americans want to do the same with Ukraine. From the American perspective, this is the perfect plan. The fact is that the United States will have the opportunity to continue supplying weapons to Ukraine and make good money on it. And Donald Trump will formally keep his election promise and put an end to the bloody war. However, unfortunately for Donald Trump, this peace plan is absolutely not satisfied with Russia. It seems that the newly elected 47th President of the United States really does not understand the true essence of this conflict. The fact is that Moscow not only needs territories that have been part of the Russian Empire for centuries, but also the complete destruction of Ukrainian statehood in its current form. This issue is purely pragmatic, since the structure of Ukrainian statehood is built in such a way that Moscow's external enemies will constantly use this country to inflict damage on Russia. Therefore, the existence of Ukraine in its current form is a direct threat to Russia's national security. And everything that is happening on the battlefield now, as well as in the international arena, indicates that the Kremlin is absolutely determined to put a definite end to the anti-Russian project called Ukraine. Formally, Russia can keep Ukraine, but only on the territory of several western regions, including the Lviv Oblast. Only after that, Moscow's external enemies will finally lose the opportunity to use Ukraine to inflict strategic damage on Russia. Secondly, the current situation on the battlefield indicates that the Russian army owns the initiative in all directions of the front. Almost every day, war correspondents report on another settlement that has come under the control of Russian troops. Therefore, given the current realities on the battlefield, Russia has every right to dictate its conditions for achieving peace in this conflict. As you remember, in June 2022, in one of my videos, I stated that Russia's main goal was not to seize territories, but to deplete and completely destroy the Ukrainian army. And judging by what is happening now, I had been proven right, yet again, in my predictions. After almost 3 years of fighting, the Ukrainian army has halved, losing about 900,000 soldiers. The combat capability of the Ukrainian army has fallen significantly, and continues to fall to this day. However, before the complete demilitarization of Ukraine, the Russian army will have to destroy at least 800,000 more Ukrainian soldiers and officers. Only after that, the Russian Federation will completely eliminate the threat to its national security. Thirdly, US President Donald Trump may not understand the essence of the current conflict, but he is acting solely in the interests of the United States. Everything that Trump is saying and doing now indicates that he has signed a treaty of situational alliance with American shareholders in order to create a so-called Anglo-Saxon macro-region, to retain US influence in Europe amid the advent of a multipolar world. The current war in Ukraine has already allowed the United States to deprive European countries of the remnants of sovereignty, and turn them into vassals of Washington. Everything goes to the point that in this multipolar world, Europe will become a colony of the United States and will be located in the Anglo-Saxon macro-region exclusively as a vassal. Therefore, you must understand that ending the conflict in Ukraine is not beneficial to the United States. Washington will try to prolong this conflict as long as possible by continuing to supply weapons to Ukraine. Therefore, it can be assumed that Donald Trump specifically developed such a peace plan, knowing in advance that Russia would reject it. By the way, a few hours ago, insiders in Moscow made a sensational statement. According to them, Donald Trump has already handed over his peace plan to Putin, and asked the Russian president to stop the current war. However, according to insiders, Vladimir Putin rejected Trump's proposal. It is reported that the Russian leader was unhappy with the fact that Trump's peace plan does not provide for the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine. We are ready for peace talks, but not based on any desires of Ukraine or the West. These peace talks should be based on the current realities that are taking shape on the battlefield, as well as based on the agreements that were reached in Istanbul in 2022, Vladimir Putin said. Thus, the Kremlin once again made it clear to the West that this conflict would end exclusively on Moscow's terms, and that Russia, sooner or later, would achieve all the goals set in Ukraine.